9 guests Johnny Carson found the creepiest. For 3 decades, Johnny Carson reigned as the unflappable king of late-night television. More than 22,000 guests crossed the stage of The Tonight Show, from Hollywood icons and politicians to eccentrics, pranksters, and ordinary people with extraordinary quirks. Carson greeted them all with his signature charm, the quick wit, the raised eyebrow, and the instinctive grace that made him America's midnight companion. But behind that calm, polished facade was a man who noticed everything. Johnny had an uncanny radar for human behavior. He could tell instantly when something in the air was off. And though he rarely lost his composure on camera, there were moments when even he felt the chill. Those rare nights when a guest's presence shifted the studio's temperature, leaving Carson visibly uneasy. Tonight, we revisit 9 guests who most deeply unsettled the normally unflappable Johnny Carson, people whose energy, words, or sheer unpredictability crept under his skin, and made the studio feel for few unforgettable moments, like something out of a fever dream. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. 1. Truman Capote, the ghost at the mic. Truman Capote, literary genius and social butterfly, was once among Carson's favorite guests. But by the mid-1970s, the author of In Cold Blood and Breakfast at Tiffany's had become a ghost of his former self, pale, frail, and adrift in the haze of addiction. When Capote returned to The Tonight Show in 1975, the audience expected witty gossip. What they got instead was something far stranger. He had this whispering voice, recalled one director. It was like trying to interview someone who kept fading in and out of another dimension. Capote spoke of death, the paranormal, and mysterious Hollywood tragedies, trailing off mid-sentence, then suddenly resuming as if no time had passed. His eyes wandered into empty space. The studio fell silent. Carson kept glancing in the direction of Capote's stare, unnerved by whatever invisible company the author seemed to be keeping. When a commercial finally came, Johnny leaned back and whispered to his producer. He sounded like a haunted house whispering its own memoir. Afterward, he admitted he'd felt like he was talking to someone halfway between life and death. Capote was quietly removed from a guest list for a time, not out of anger, but because Carson genuinely didn't want to feel that chill again. 2. Klaus Kinski, Wild-Eyed Rage. Where Capote was ghostly, Klaus Kinski was volcanic. The German actor, notorious for his explosive temperament, appeared in the late 1970s while promoting a film with director Werner Herzog. The moment Kinski walked on stage, the atmosphere shifted. His eyes bulged, unblinking. His body trembled with barely contained fury. Carson, who usually leaned toward his guests, instinctively leaned away. Every question seemed to ignite something in Kinski. Asked about his art, he ranted about religion, apocalypse, and mankind's corruption. When Johnny tried a joke to ease the tension, Kinski turned those fierce eyes on him in utter silence. The audience gasped audibly. "We actually considered cutting to commercial for safety," said a producer. Johnny looked like he was calculating how to survive the next 5 minutes. Ed McMahon later said it best, Johnny wasn't interviewing him, he was defusing him. Afterward, Carson confessed that Kinski's unblinking stare felt like looking into an oncoming storm. The crew never forgot it. Whenever a guest seemed difficult, someone would joke, "At least it's not Kinski." And everyone would nod in nervous agreement. 3. Robert Blake, The Cold Stare. When actor Robert Blake appeared on The Tonight Show, he brought not fury, but ice. Known for In Cold Blood and Beretta, Blake arrived with a coiled, smoldering hostility that no one expected. From the moment he sat down, his eyes locked on Carson with unnerving stillness. It wasn't that he was rude, a writer remembered. It was that he looked at Johnny like a predator studying prey. Every question received a clipped, sarcastic answer. Every attempt at humor was met with silence or a slow, cold smirk. The energy drained out of the studio. The band fidgeted. The audience stopped laughing. Johnny smiled tighter, flipped through his notes, and inched back in his chair. Later, he told a producer, "He wasn't talking to me. He was observing me. I felt like a specimen. When Blake left, Carson exhaled visibly, something he almost never did. He never invited him back. Years later, when Blake faced real-life legal troubles, Carson reportedly murmured, "I'm not surprised." That man had darkness in him. For Andy Kaufman as Tony Clifton, absolute chaos. Few performers could rattle Carson like Andy Kaufman, but it wasn't Andy himself. It was his grotesque alter ego, Tony Clifton, a chain-smoking, belligerent lounge singer who embodied every rule-breaking impulse Kaufman had. When Clifton appeared on The Tonight Show, chaos followed. He arrived in an ill-fitting tuxedo, reeking of cologne, insulting everyone in sight. He interrupted Johnny, mocked Ed McMahon, and hurled crude remarks at staff. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or recoil. Carson tried to maintain order, but Clifton wouldn't play along. Then came the final straw. Clifton hurled a glass of water toward Doc Severinsen. Carson, for the only time anyone could remember, walked off his own set. During the break, security physically removed Clifton, who was still screaming obscenities. "Johnny never walked off," said a stunned stagehand. "That's how shaken he was." Later, Carson admitted what had disturbed him most wasn't the chaos, but the commitment. "I've dealt with drunks and egomaniacs," he said, but that was someone who refused to acknowledge reality. Kaufman would return as himself, but Tony Clifton was banned for life. 5. George Jessel, the racist relic. Not all unsettling moments came from madness or menace. Some came from a time that had simply passed. When veteran vaudeville performer George Jessel appeared in the early 1970s, Carson expected nostalgia. Instead, he got a living relic of entertainment's darkest habits. Jessel began telling jokes from another era, ugly, racist jokes that made the audience freeze. "The air went dead," recalled a cameraman. You could feel everyone thinking, did he really just say that? Carson's smile froze. Cutting the segment short, he swiftly went to commercial. Backstage, he was furious. "That's not what this show is about," he said. Jessel was never invited back. What haunted Johnny wasn't just the content, it was the disconnect. Jessel seemed completely unaware that the world had changed. It was like talking to a ghost from another century, one producer said. Except this ghost didn't realize it was dead. 6. Divine, the shock of the 1970s. By the mid-1970s, drag performer Divine had become a cult sensation through John Waters' outrageous films. But when Divine appeared on The Tonight Show, mainstream America wasn't ready. Neither, truthfully, was Johnny. Divine arrived in full regalia, beehive wig, glittering gown, dramatic makeup. The audience didn't know how to react. Some laughed nervously, others stared in stunned silence. Carson, polite but visibly uncertain, shifted in his chair, unsure how to frame the conversation. Johnny kept glancing at Ed McMahon like he was asking for backup. A writer remembered. He wasn't hostile, just lost. Despite the tension, Carson treated Divine with respect. When the segment ended, he turned to a producer and said, "Well, that was something different for the folks in Omaha tonight." His Midwestern understatement said it all. He had been shaken, but intrigued. In hindsight, Divine's appearance became a small but important moment in TV history. Proof that Carson, even when uncomfortable, would still open the door to what America wasn't yet ready to see. 7. Vincent Price, theatrical and ominous. Carson adored Vincent Price, yet even affection couldn't erase the unease the horror legend sometimes inspired. Elegant, witty, and chillingly articulate, Price could turn a friendly chat into something out of Poe with just a shift in tone. During one memorable visit, he read The Raven under dimmed lights and candlelight. As his deep, sinister voice filled the studio, Carson's expression subtly changed from amusement to genuine unease. He made the room feel colder, a director said. Johnny joked afterward that Vincent had summoned something. Price once gifted Carson a taxidermied bat, delighting in Johnny's awkward politeness as he held it. Vincent loved to spook him, a crew member said. He'd lower his voice and grab Johnny's wrist mid-story. You'd see Carson jump. But Carson never banned Price. He adored him. "He can terrify you," Johnny once said. and make you hope he comes back next week to do it again. 8. Margot Hemingway, A Disturbing Spiral. In the early 1980s, Margot Hemingway, glamorous model and granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway, came on The Tonight Show to promote a film. What should have been routine turned heartbreaking. She looked beautiful, a producer remembered, but something was very wrong. Her speech was erratic, her eyes unfocused. She would start answering a question, trail off into silence, then resume with something unrelated. The studio went still. Carson's face shifted from hostly charm to genuine concern. He shortened his questions, tried to protect her. Afterward, when someone backstage joked about her state, Johnny cut them off sharply. That wasn't a diva. That was someone in trouble. Years later, when Hemingway died by suicide, staff members remembered that night with a chill. Johnny sensed it. One said he didn't know what was wrong, but he knew she was slipping away. 9. Andy Warhol, The Dead-Eyed Silence. Finally, there was Andy Warhol, whose 1980s appearance was perhaps the strangest of all. Warhol didn't explode, insult, or disturb. He simply did nothing. Carson asked questions. Warhol responded with one-word answers, nods, or blank stares. Minutes stretched like hours. It was like interviewing a wax figure. Johnny later quipped, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. The audience fidgeted, unsure whether they were witnessing avant-garde brilliance or social collapse. It wasn't hostility, said one crew member. It was existential dread. He just wouldn't connect. After the show, Carson sat in silence for a moment, then said, "Either that was the worst interview I've ever done or it was genius. And I don't know which bothers me more." Epilogue. For